Welcome back to the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. Junior days are underway. A contacted period is underway. Penn State coaches weren't able to hit the road last year at this time to see players and their families that are already signees, or to see high school coaches and teachers and the janitor of guys they are targeting in the underclassmen realm. So that's all back on the table now, Ryan. It means a busy January for us, an active one for fans to follow. And we'll kick things off today with the first junior day of 2022 for Penn State. No commitments, which it's not a surprise to either one of us. We talked about it last week, and we also hit on it on the website that, Penn State doesn't typically net a ton or even any commitments in the class of 20, the next class this year to be the class of 2023. But in years past, they don't typically net those guys in this first month of the year. Maybe they get one here and there, but it's somewhat rare. So point being, not the end of the world if Penn State comes out of this first junior day without a commitment, because I think it's a safe bet to say that they've set the groundwork for some future ones down the road. But let's start with your initial reactions to how things went.
Good list. I believe it was 9 4-star 2023 players. Quentin Martin already has a 4-star rating. He's 2024. So we'll say 10 4-star players and a bunch of other quality guys. I think Musa Kane, somebody that could end up moving up down the road too. And Jaden Bonzu, we currently don't have ranked. His recruitment just exploded. He transfers to St. Peter's Prep in before the season, and then from September to now, he's got 20 plus offers. And speaking to people in the notebook I did yesterday, they said that he's physically probably the most impressive player that was there. So it was it was a pretty good list overall. You got two really important offensive tackle prospects coming up, and Evan Link and Samson Okunlola. You got two important Florida guys, defensive tackles, I think, and LeBlanc and Walker. Walker's definitely a D tackle, and LeBlanc, we had him kind of more so as a D end, and then he comes up and checks in at 270 pounds, 6'4.5". So that screams interior to me as well. But we can get in all these guys, man. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with those tackles, or what do you think?
I think so, because the tackles tend to be a spot that Penn State fans gravitate toward for obvious reasons. So I think that makes the most sense to start there. And we'll kick things around here as we continue on this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast on January 18th. Yeah, let's start with the tackles.
All right, so Samson Okunlola, I'll have a story on him this afternoon. Had a good talk with him last night. But, I think the main thing to know there is just that it's still incredibly early for him. He went to Virginia, Georgia, and Florida. And those visits were primarily for his brother, Samuel, who, of course, ended up at Pitt. And right. I believe they were all, I think the UVA one was an official visit in the fall, but the other ones were all back in the summer. And this was his first trip then to Penn State. So I just get the sense that that's a recruitment that's going to last a while. He's ranked 54th nationally in the country, right? So, especially whenever, and if you look across the region, there's not a ton of true tackle prospects in the Mid-Atlantic. So he will be highly coveted and somebody I think we're going to be talking about just a ton. The other one is Evan Link, of course, from Gonzaga. He measured in around 6'5.5", and 290 pounds. A true tackle prospect. I believe he had a pretty good reach too. It was around 33 inches, which Penn State was happy to see. The thing with Link, I've been pushing for a while now that I think Penn State's the favorite with him, the early favorite. I don't want to, that's not what Evan's saying, but to me, just read the visits and it makes sense. But the big thing with him is he has an upcoming Stanford visit here on January 29th. And, he's one of those players where I genuinely believe academics are going to be more important or just as important as playing, high level quality football. Whenever you have Stanfords and Northwesterns and academics are incredibly important, I circled this January 29th visit as just one of those pivot points, man. Like, this feels like to me that if he goes out there and he loves it, Penn State's going to have to maybe fight for him harder than what it's looked like in over the last month or two. Or he can go out there, it's too far. I'm sure he's going to love Palo Alto, right? Everybody does. But, if for some reason it's too far or it's not a perfect visit, then this could be Penn State's opportunity to, I don't want to say run away with it, but, they'll be even more comfortable than they are. So January 29th, we'll have a lot of guys to recap for Penn State's junior day that day, but learning how his Stanford visit went will be one of the most important things that I'll be trying to learn in the beginning of February. While we're on the offensive line subject, I'm just going to go into two other guys real quick then with Sam Pendleton and Amir Herring. Penn State has two guards committed, right? And I was wondering, like, are they still going to push for interior guys? And I very much get the impression that they still will. I mean, they are just going to, as they should, they're going to just try and load up as much talent as they can for Phil Troutwine's room. To me, I feel like Pendleton between the two is a little bit higher than Herring. Now, if you look at the ratings, Herring's 221 nationally, Pendleton's 371. But what I think separates them in Penn State's eyes is that Pendleton is probably going to be a center, and they haven't landed too many quality center prospects in recent years. That was something they were interested in last year. It didn't really work out exactly how they were hoping. So that's why I think Pendleton is very much still in the mix there. He just got a Clemson offer the other day, and he's made it very clear for the longest time now that that's one that he highly covets. Of course, he's from North Carolina, so Clemson's obviously has a lot of pull down there. So I'll be curious to see how those goes, but good visits for all four. Pendleton, he's been very high on Michigan, and he's talking about a February commitment. To me, I just feel like he's going to keep adding offers, so is that going to put pressure on him to maybe not decide next month?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I guess my question for you, just to finish this part of the conversation here, is what is Penn State's preferred plan here at offensive line? Would they prefer to get, two guys in a transfer portal, four guys in the high school ranks and call it a class? Yeah, I'm just saying in general, not just specific here, because obviously we already know where things stand there. But, we heard Andy Frank talk during the early signing day about this idea that, it's probably easier to fix problems along the offensive line in the portal. As we know, though, and as we're going to talk about a little bit later with coaches being on the road and them seeing two transfer targets, these guys are not easy to land, and everybody wants them. So what's the best way to go here?
I mean, definitely, if you can land transfer portal guys, it's a lot easier to get them on the field quicker, right? I mean, Steen's already, played a good bit. I mean, we're going to talk about him, but Tyler Steen, of course, for Vanderbilt. We're going to talk about him a good bit coming up here, and he's an important prospect for them. Now, and then Hunter Norzad, of course, he played for Cornell. I mean,
Yep.
Cornell's not what the SEC is, but I mean, this they see a lot in this film that they like, and I hope he coming in as a grad transfer and really focusing on football. I think both of those guys are incredibly important. I don't know what the number is going to be for offensive line as far as 2023 is concerned, but I just know that if they got to add extra guys, I think they're going to add extra guys. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we'll take the transfers out of it if they could maybe reach 5 offensive linemen, if they could get 5 quality guys. So they're really trying to stack some talent in that room. I think
Good
we don't know about some. Yeah, we don't know about some of the young guys, but just the fact that the young guys weren't pressuring some of the guys who were struggling at times this season says a lot. So I'll be curious just to kind of see how it moves forward. But, again, I was thinking, okay, you got 2 guards already. Do you got to keep pushing? And the responses have consistently been, yeah, we're going to keep adding interior guys. And, of course, if they can get 2 quality tackles, they'll take it.
Yeah, if you visit BlueWhiteIllustrated.com today, you'll see David Eckert, our colleague at BWI, has a scholarship chart up. And it's a little bit scary, Ryan, along the offensive line, numbers-wise.
Yes, it is. And I'll be curious to see. I think what I'm really kind of wondering is some of the younger guys who haven't pushed yet. What happens with them kind of moving forward? Are they, obviously they'll be here this spring moving forward, but just if they kind of restack and load up on talent here, and I'm sure they're going to try and go for more transfer portal guys down the road. What happens with that room? Are they trying to? I don't want to say shuffling guys out is not the right way to put it, but if they just stack those rooms and young guys surpass them, what happens there moving forward? So it's definitely a point that they are really trying to fix. I know Phil Troutwine is pushing hard with a lot of. There's actually a couple quality 2023 guys too who don't have offers yet that I know they're already starting to work on. So it just everything behind the scenes points that they're going to stack up on offensive linemen in this class. So we'll see.
All right. Well, obviously, it was not just offensive linemen that visited Penn State for Junior Day last weekend. And of course, when we say Junior Day, we're talking about all kinds of underclassmen. You have sophomores, you even have some freshmen from time to time. So let's just hit on a couple of those guys here before we move on too much further, Ryan. We know that there were a couple of Florida guys in town, and John Walker and Derek LeBlanc. You mentioned Jaden Bonsu, the safety. Quentin Martin's the 2024 guy who we talked a lot about before. Tamir Robinson, the 4-star Pittsburgh linebacker, was in town. Who else stood out to you from this weekend's visit list outside of that tackle group we just talked about?
Well, I mean, I think the guy we have to touch on is Darius Redman, the wide receiver from Powell, Tennessee. Long story short, man, I'm hearing that he has maybe a little interest in possibly committing. And what Penn State's trying to figure out then is just is he a take right now for them? So that'll be interesting moving forward. I think I know they like him a lot. There's no doubt about that. But is he a guy that they take right now compared to some other wide receivers that they have higher on the board? But Redmond came up, had a really good quality visit. Really seemed to enjoy his time, and there's some talk since then that he has interest in committing. Now, I believe his other top schools are Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and I'm missing one. I know he's visited Tennessee a couple times, visited Kentucky a couple times. I think he's going to go back to Kentucky here in a week. So that'll be interesting to see how that visit goes, because they weren't in his top 5, but he's still visiting them. So something to watch out for. But he's 6 foot 180. He's probably another slot guy though, and that's kind of one thing I wonder is just if you have other slot guys ahead of him, and you have some quality 6 foot or so guys already on your roster. Do you try and focus on some bigger guys here moving forward before you would accept a commitment from a Darius Redmond? But look, they're not bringing him up on campus if they don't like him a lot. So I think that's just something we're going to have to watch moving forward. But some Tweety birds are saying that he is interested in that, so that'll be something we watch.
It is.
Do you want to keep going on?
No,
right.
We have to leave an ad spot, so there was a little pause there. I should have probably given you a heads up on that, but there's a little bit of how the sausage is made. That's okay, everyone. It's hard. It's a lot easier to pick those out when there's a nice long pause. But at any rate, this is the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. Ryan, what is as we can look back to past history and talk a little bit about this. Obviously, last year with no visits taking place this time of year, it didn't really help us do that. But, would you expect over the next couple of weekends any commitments, or do you maybe survey the landscape and think that now with the February dead period that comes up after this visit weekend, that you're probably more likely than not going to see guys maybe take all their trips here in January, and then maybe we'll see a couple of decisions in February, or are guys just going to hold off until that spring official visit period gets here? What have we learned over the last couple of cycles in that regard? And obviously we've had some crazy cycles here the last 2 years, so it's not the perfect way of determining this, but just based on past experience and everything else, what have we noticed?
I need to see the individual. I need to see what the next 2 lists look like for me to say, like, it's all about the individual, right? I mean, there are some players who I think if they had an awesome visit up here, they would say, screw it, I'm already leaning this way, let's go. History tells you no, that a lot of guys don't end up committing to Penn State. I think we talked about this before. Charlie Katshier, Curtis Jacobs, and I know I'm missing somebody else. They made moves in previous Januaries, but a lot of guys don't. And of course, you have those official visits in April, May, and June, and that's a major reason why a lot of guys want to come to spring practice too in March and in early April, because those spring practice visits are also, I think, kind of underrated visits. Now, obviously, you get to watch practice, but a lot of guys will come up like on a Wednesday, and you get a personal visit, and you get to watch practice. And I think those are kind of oftentimes one of the more underrated moments in guys' recruitment, especially when I talk to them 3, 4, 5 months down the road. A lot of guys point to that March visit or that early April visit and said, "Man, that was kind of a turning point for me." So. Is it possible? Yeah. I mean, I need to see what the lists look like here. I mean, I've only got a handful of guys confirmed right now for the 22nd, and we actually have even more confirmed for the 29th. And from what I've gathered, the 29th is going to be the bigger junior day than this upcoming one. They seem to want more quality guys coming on the 29th, just from what I've gathered so far. But it's always possible. One wouldn't surprise me. But history says their guys are going to wait till March and April.
All right, let's move on to the transfer portal. You reported on Monday that Penn State had a chance to check in with two of its top offensive line targets. And, we have to cover this almost every week, every other week, because it's one of the questions we're asked about most. But it certainly does have a bit of a Jayshon Barham-like feeling to it, where if you're not familiar with what I'm getting at there, we can try and answer it with different words each week, but until something new happens, it's kind of the same old, same old. Penn State pushing, everybody else pushing. But what's the latest on those two guys? How important do you think those stops were this week on Monday for Penn State?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the main thing fans need to know right now is that class is in session, and we're a week in. So they can't add anybody till May. And that's just kind of – that it's unfortunate for Penn State, and this is why the transfer portal isn't always exactly equal, because there's definitely some other schools out there who aren't starting classes. I don't think I believe until next week, so that they get extra time there to try and squeeze guys in, and that hurts, from that perspective. But it is just kind of what it is. So to circle back, Tyler Steen, offensive tackle prospect for Vanderbilt, and Hunter Norzad, offensive guard prospect from Cornell, both hosted the coaching staff on Monday. Norzad is back home, which is Atlanta. So they made stop in Atlanta and Nashville, and it was the entire offensive staff. So I know they are, you're not bringing the whole staff for nothing, right? I mean, you're trying to make a big impression there. I know Auburn was in to see Norzad. I was expecting Auburn to be, at least as of Sunday night. I believe they made it, but I don't know for sure. And we know Iowa is very much in the mix with him as well. So he has official visits coming up to Auburn, Penn State, Iowa, and I believe Virginia Tech is the other one. I believe for Norzad, and we're still waiting to get some information on Steen, but. We know these guys are both incredibly important. One thing I think is interesting with Steen is that he plays right tackle, but there's some people who believe he's best at guard. So my point with that is just that he's not a 100% bona fide tackle. Yes, he played it for Vanderbilt, and I think that's where he wants to play, but I get the impression he's a bit more like Caden Wallace than Rasheed Walker when it comes to build and things of that sort. But both important guys, man. They got –
Yeah, go ahead. Finish your thought. Yeah, he said, they're huge for this class potentially because, we'll see it in spring practice. But again, I can't recommend enough if you really want to get a sense for where Penn State is on this scholarship offensive lineman front. And just from a development standpoint, check it out, BlueIllustrated.com. It's going to be in the news section of the website. You can also find it on the Lions Den premium board if you sign up for $1 for 1 year of access to Blue White Illustrated and On3. But that scholarship chart's scary, man. There's a lot of hope and a lot of projection and a lot of, well, maybe this is the year this guy or that guy will take a step forward. And, I know that Salim Wormley was supposed to be a starter. I know that he, will be back at some point. I highly can't imagine it would be for much of spring practice, but we'll see. They think Oluju Fashanu can step up, but there's not a lot of guys in that class otherwise who we know for sure are ready to go. So these two are huge needs. There's no question. And it's going to take a little bit of time for Penn State to figure this out. I was just going to circle back quick to the class date thing. It's almost a blessing and a curse for Penn State because it does help you figure out your side of the transfer portal in terms of, well, if guys are going to leave, there's not a whole lot of window for them to do it between the end of the bowl game and the start of the school year. So that helps to an extent, I guess. But it also does put you in this situation where, if you have a guy who thinks he could be ready to be somewhere by mid-January and you're a school that starts in mid-January, like some places do, or even the mid to late January, you certainly get an advantage there.
Yeah. And this is something I've talked about with Penn State sources a lot recently. It's just that you have that element of it, which, it's how the cards are, right? They're not always going to be stacked in your favor, and that's a big difference. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of schools who won't start until this upcoming Monday. So they have a whole extra 2 weeks to try and fill needs there. And that matters. It really matters when you played a bowl game on January 1 and then you start classes, what was it, like 11 days later? Yeah. And I'm not saying of course they were working on it from them, but you can only do so much in a day, so that's huge. But it is what it is. And, one other thing too is just a lot of these guys are going into the portal and they already know where they're going. So I just and Franklin's already hit on that before. And the more I talk to people behind the scenes, they say that is a major emphasis that I don't think people understand from the outside looking in. I would love to. I tried to actually get hey, how many of these guys do you think already have their place picked, before they enter? And I just, nobody was. ventured to guess on like percentages or anything like that. But that's something I'd be curious about. But it is just a consistent point that people keep bringing up is from the outside looking in. You see all these guys, and Penn State recruited them in the past, and it looks good, but. The reality is that guy's entering the portal because his head coach has already kind of lined up a spot for him, and there's not a lot you can do other than
is it a problem though? I mean, I know James Franklin's.
No.
I don't know if complained is the right word, but he certainly brought it up as something that's a challenge that fans and the media and everybody else need to be aware of. But I really don't see it as a problem. I mean, it's more of. How does Penn State put itself in the position to be that school that lands a guy? I mean, Noah Kane's the perfect example, right? Matt Zenitz from On3 reports basically 24 hours before he puts out his own statement that he's in the portal, and then 6 hours after that, it might not quite be that math, but it was close, that he's going to LSU. He did not decide to go to LSU. It's not like he picked up the phone on that day that the announcement came and called Brian Kelly and said, hey, do you have a spot for me? I mean, they were figuring this out long in advance. Somebody was anyway. And you know what? That's just the way it is. So for Penn State, I think – yeah, it's something to be aware of, especially to the point you just made a second ago, which is that, there's sometimes guys that say, we'll see a guy goes in the portal and fans will say, well, so-and-so recruited him, or Penn State, was the final three or final two or whatever. And that's great and well. But to your point, I mean, these things move quickly, and more often than not, those things play no role in what Penn State could have as a chance for that guy, because he probably already knows where he's going or 2 or 3 places he's going. And it also seems like, and I'll get off my soapbox here after this, but it's a lot of Florida guys, a lot of Southern guys who get opportunities to go to other Southern schools, and they're just more likely to stay on there, no matter what they thought in high school. It just seems to me that at least in this particular cycle, those guys aren't coming north.
I don't have much out of that. I mean, you pretty much hit on it all. So we'll see. Right. I mean, I think right now the plan is to try and get these guys figured out and see what happens in the spring. But I don't see a whole lot of movement coming. And now the classes are started, and there's no real reason to, because again, you're going to have another wave come after spring practice, and they're going to have to hit. They're going to have to hit on some of these guys, especially if they miss out on either Norzad or Steve. Even if they get both, shoot, man, I still think there's other holes that they can fill. So linebacker, man, we haven't even really talked about linebacker a whole lot, and that they definitely, I think they would like to add some experience at Mike. So
yeah,
it'll be something to watch.
With good reason. Tyler Elsdon, obviously, I think can play both. Kobe King's an inside guy, but yeah, you're probably not feeling so great about where that Mike linebacker's position is at. And really, just the totality of the depth. I mean, you can say what you want about, maybe Ellis Brooks, maybe Brandon Smith could have come back, should have come back, whatever. And, we're not here to disagree with that or otherwise. But point being is you lost 2 starters, and then you lose Jesse Luketa, who played a little bit of both. And you get Curtis Jacobs back, but you're going to have some young guys there beside him unless you can bring somebody or somebodies in to really add some depth to that room. So we'll see. We're about 3/4 of the way through this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. Ryan Snyder and Greg Pickel kicking it around on this January 18th, cold January 18th at that. But let's get into where the coaches are today, Ryan. So all week long, inside the Lions Den premium form at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Again, it's $1 for 1 year of access. Sign up today. If you go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you'll see it right at the top. You can't miss it, a big green button. Click that, get the premium inside information from Ryan. But we'll keep most of this behind the paywall, Ryan. But there are Penn State coaches, obviously, are on the road during the contact period here, and they're making some stops in places that may not be as cold as we are here in central Pennsylvania. So what can you tell us about that? And just how important is it for Penn State to have this opportunity back after not being able to do it a year ago and get the feedback on guys that they typically get at this time of year from all the people who are around a prospect that maybe aren't directly related to coaching him on the field or helping him block better or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, every school's able to do it now, so
right.
I mean, it's important, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of equal. Everybody's out there, so I don't look at it as like, oh, Penn State has an advantage now over Maryland or anything like that. I mean, because Maryland's hitting the road just as heavy. But I mean, it is incredibly important to put faces the names, and build relationships with coaches, especially because we're talking 2023 here for the most part, and majority of these are building connections with coaches and really just digging on guys, learning about guys, learning the good or the bad about off the field and whatever it may be. And that's always a major part of the recruiting process. So, but yeah, so we've got a junior day. Of course, I keep saying we, I don't know why I keep doing that. Penn State has a junior day coming up on Saturday. So the staff's down south a good bit today, and they'll work their way back up north. Closer we get to Saturday, the closer they are. Obviously, it makes sense, right? Because of travel. But there's a couple notable stops. Of course, they were in Atlanta to see Norzad, and now Franklin is back in Atlanta, or he's staying in Atlanta, excuse me, to check up on all the top schools down there. And there's not too many specific guys that they're firmly in the mix with, but it's just kind of you have to go in and smile and shake hands and make it clear that Penn State's very interested, because Atlanta is one of the hotbeds of talent. It always has been, and it always will be. So he's in that area today. I know Stacy Collins, the new special teams coach, is with him because they're going to do an in-home visit with Alex Paqueta and his family, and they're also going to actually meet with Sanders Sahadak's family in South Carolina. And I know, like, Sanders is already on campus. Why does that make sense? Well, of course, there were no in-home visits last year, so from what I gathered is when the travel aligns, and they can't really meet with 2023 guys at night, so sometimes you're just in the area and there's not much you can do in the evening. They will go meet with families for the 2021 guys who signed last year because they weren't able to do it last year. For example, I believe later in the week, Khalil Dinkins' family and Trey Wallace's family, they're going to be stops they make, and they did one other. What was it? Jeff Davis. They did that on Friday. So just whatever the travel and aligns, that'll be the plan. So just something to note. Yurchich, though, I think is kind of one of the notable ones today. That's the one that kind of stands out to me. He's going to be in Memphis to see a couple prospects. Brock Glenn and Braylon Ragland are two quality quarterback prospects. Ragland is the one with the majority of the offers. I believe he's up to 20 or so now. Penn State's not quite 20. Excuse me, no. I think he's got like 6, 7, 8. Actually, my fault. I was way off on that. I think Marcel Reed from Tennessee is the one I was thinking of, and he was originally going to go to Tennessee, but it sounds like he's not going to be in that area now. But anyway, Braylon Ragland, decent prospect. Tennessee, Auburn, a couple of schools who have offered him. I believe, who was it? It was Brock Glenn, I believe, had a good performance at the All-American Bowl last week. And, Penn State has access to all that film. So whatever those guys were doing at that All-American Combine, excuse me, I said All-American Bowl, I meant the Combine. Penn State has access to that stuff. And I get the impression that Yurchich has maybe been watching a couple of these guys, and that's why he's making those trips. Marcus Stokes, too, from East High School in Florida, is another player he's going to check up on. Stokes doesn't have any offers yet. But he really grabbed some attention at the All-America Combine, too, the other week. So that's just somebody to keep an eye on. Aside from that, it's kind of the normal areas for a lot of these guys. Jalen Snyder, of course, is in Florida. Manny Diaz is in Florida. Snyder's checking up on some running back
One
prospects.
thought there, if I could stop you for a sec. I was impressed by a lot of the feedback you got from, and our colleagues as well on 3, got about Manny Diaz. Sounds like he had a good first junior day. Look, I know it's all positive almost all the time. You can't really blow a junior day, but good first impressions, it seems like, for the new Penn State defensive coordinator on that group. They got to meet with him last weekend.
The one guy I didn't hit on earlier that I wanted to hit on earlier is Musa Kane. And Kane was one who I felt like Poindexter was a major part of his recruitment because he recruited Musa's brother Sanusi to Purdue. There's a good relationship there. But from talking to him, it really felt like Diaz was the one that he spent a lot of quality time with during his visit and really kicked it off with. So he was the one guy that, I thought we had a real genuine good discussion about Diaz, and, I left it with like, okay, Diaz clearly made a strong impression on him. And Kane's a guy that I think right now is leaning towards Penn State. We'll see what happens down the road. But yeah, I mean, there's positive vibes for Diaz. I mean, why wouldn't there be? He's
Sure.
very accomplished coach. But he just has to get to know guys, and that's what these junior days are all about. So where did I leave off? Was it Stubblefield? guess Stubblefield.
Yep.
He's going to see Noah Rogers in North Carolina. Noah Rogers is an incredibly important wide receiver prospect. I was talking earlier about Darius Redman. They're trying to figure out what they want to do with him. Well, guys like Rogers, Rodney Gallagher, a few others, they're the guys that they are highly coveting and would take in a second. So I know he's checking him out, and he'll check out a couple other 2024 guys in the area. I know Alex Taylor from Grimsley's a guy he's pretty high on as well. So he'll be in Northern North Carolina. Troutwine's also in Atlanta. Of course, the offensive staff was there for Norzad, so he's going to float around, check out some offensive linemen. And just other than that, it's really just kind of regional recruiting. Terry Smith is in Philly. Anthony Poindexter seems like Poindexter is going to take over Virginia Beach. That seems like a new change they've had because John Scott was originally seeing that area and it didn't feel like they were getting much traction there. So it makes sense, right? I mean, Dex is a Virginia kind of legend, right? So put him in Virginia Beach. So I mean, it's really. Every day you have a couple guys like Yurchich who are doing something that I think's like really interesting. Here's some up and coming 2023 quarterbacks. But for the most part, man, it's just really kind of regional recruiting. Shaking hands, smiling, and making it clear that hey, even if you don't have a guy right now that we want, we'll be here in 2 years when you do.
Well, we will be here the rest of this week and, of course, all of the rest of this month as Penn State coaches continue to hit the road and host prospects for junior days. That's going to do it for this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. We will talk to you next week on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast.